Thank you, Bob. As studies on the project progressed, it was determined that the only alternatives that satisfactorily addressed the needs of the project would involve the construction of two bridges, one on 9th Street and one on 10th Street. In December of 2004, during Mayor Onspach's administration, the Federal Highway issued a record of decision and officially designated dual bridges. With this action, environmental clearance was concluded and final design began. The final design process included the construction plans for the bridges, the finalization of the right-of-way plans for the properties that were to be acquired, and the beginning of the mitigation process. The right-of-way acquisition process started in January of 2008. Mayor Trish Ward oversaw most of the acquisition phase. I came into office near the end of that phase. In all, 61 buildings were razed with 8 businesses and 95 residents relocated. Our prime consulting engineer, McCormick Taylor, bridge engineer Dewberry, and the rest of the design team have performed an exceptional job throughout this project. I'd like to recognize their efforts at this time under the direction of John Watson. McCormick Taylor consulted with the State Historic Preservation Office in order to identify areas that were likely to contain buried cultural remains such as wells and privies that would warrant archaeological testing. Here to share some details on the cultural resources found during this phase is Deb Hoover with McCormick Taylor.
Hello, and thank you for having me today. I was asked to talk about the archaeology and what was encountered on the project, but before I get to that, I do want to mention that from a historic resources or building standpoint, this project is located within the North Lebanon Historic District. Because of the impact we knew we would be having on the district, meaning that we were going to have to demolish several of the buildings, we worked with the city, the Federal Highway Administration, PennDOT, and the Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission to mitigate for that impact. That mitigation involves several things, but the most involved and obvious is the overall look of the bridge. We formed and worked with a community design task force that Bob Hoffman talked earlier about, but the overall look of the bridge was designed to incorporate architectural elements from the surrounding buildings and buildings within the historic district. In regards to archaeology, testing was undertaken for the project in 2010. The testing identified 14 privies, which are outhouse pits, 2 wells, 1 cistern, 15 cesspools and pipes, 127 post molds, 6 structural related trenches, and 19 trash features. The majority of the identified features were able to be avoided by the project or were considered to not be significant, but we did end up excavating 2 privies and 1 well. These features were excavated and thousands of artifacts were recovered from them. The artifacts are currently being analyzed and they will be used to interpret how people lived in Lebanon in the 1800s. Once the artifact analysis is completed, information about life in Lebanon in the 1800s will be shared with the public in the form of an evening public presentation and a booklet. One of the most sensitive issues we encountered on the project was related to a cemetery that was found. Historic records indicated that the presence of the Zion Lutheran Church Cemetery on the east side of the 300 block of 10th Street, where numerous row houses were located. Historic records indicated that the cemetery was in use at the site between 1841 and 1881. The records also indicated that human remains had been moved to the Mount Lebanon Cemetery around 1881, prior to when the cemetery was sold for residential and commercial development. The outcome of the archaeological testing was that while most of the bodies had been relocated as recorded, some had not been removed. The grave removal began on November 1st, 2010, and was completed on November 10th. A total of 47 potential graves were excavated. Of those 47 features, 13 intact graves containing human remains were disinterred and reburied at the Mount Lebanon Cemetery. They appeared to be mostly children or infants, as the graves which contained remains were the smallest ones. The adult-sized graves had been mostly previously removed. It was decided through coordination with the city, Zion Evangelical Lutheran Church, Mount Lebanon Cemetery, the Roland Funeral Home, other consulting parties, and the project team that the right and respectful course of action was to relocate the contents of any intact graves to the Mount Lebanon Cemetery. The spirit of public cooperation that had been promoted throughout the project facilitated preparation of the reburial process. On December 2nd, 2010, a memorial service conducted by Reverend Andrew Evenson of Zion Lutheran Church was held at the cemetery, bringing closure to the reburial process. And one last note, this project has already received a national award from the Federal Highway Administration. The award was the Exemplary Human Environment Initiative, and the category was Enhancing the Environment for Human Activities, and was for encouraging active and continuous public participation and quality of life efforts to preserve a local community's rich heritage. We're hopeful that this project will receive many more awards in the future. Thank you.